on smartphones. Here are the 3 things you should know. Number 1, convenience plus distraction equals phone madness. The simple fact that our phones exist means that distractibility is literally a constant heartbeat away. This draws our attention away from things in ways that we may not even fully comprehend. For example, one scientific study showed that people messed up on cognitive tasks the closer their cell phones were to them, even if they didn't consciously think they were being distracted by them. The subjects who had their phones closest to them did the worst on these cognitive tasks, and the people who did the best had their cell phones in another room. In another study, subjects whose phones kept giving them alerts but weren't allowed to check them had increased blood pressure and all of these other weird physiological measures that indicated anxiety. The take-home message is, there is such a thing as the unconscious, and it knows where your phone is. Number 2, cell phones aren't people. Are we sure about that? Kind of feels like they're people. They're not people. I have noticed that a lot of the time, my mind totally feels like it's elsewhere, even when I'm spending time with people that I love. A lot of the reason is that I'm constantly being pulled away to check messages and pictures and social media accounts of people that I'm not even in the same room with. I can see that many of my relationships have started to suffer because of my persistent obsession with looking at people and places and things on my phone that I can't even control. My kids have pointed out that my phone use has increased. I've started using my phone at the dinner table and they have to remind me to turn it off. The thought that external forces can be negatively impacting my relationships is really freaking me out. The take-home message has to be, people in your life in person have to be more interesting than the people on our phones. Number 3, the Google effect. Even though having a phone feels like you have all of this information constantly accessible to you right at your fingertips, sociologists are actually finding that thinking that information is constantly available to you actually makes you less likely to consciously remember information. This is called the Google effect, and the basic premise is, the more you think that you can Google information, the less your brain has to work towards internally encoding it as part of your knowledge. So if you want to look up what year the Spanish Civil War was, knowing that you can Google it is a totally different brain process than knowing that you need to look that information up and have it as part of your brain, because you can't rely on the fact that it's always going to be Googleable. We're living in a generation of people who feel like they know more than any generation before, when in fact, we may actually be living in a generation where people know less than they ever did before. A great example of this is when I meet people who grew up in the age of cell phones and they can't navigate anywhere without their phone telling them where to go. For those of us who grew up with maps and needing to remember where we went without looking it up on a phone, our hippocampus had to work really hard to remember that information. People who grow up with phones and a disembodied voice telling them where to go are not encoding that information into the region of the brain responsible for mapping the world. Take-home message, you still need to learn things and retain them. You're not a robot. I don't mean to sound like a big anti-cell phone meanie, like put away your phone. Why are you looking at your phone? Go outside and play, put that phone down. But I do think it's time to take a good hard look at the way our lives have changed because of phones. We also need to assess whether or not we need to make some shifts. I know that I do. Since trying to make these shifts, my kids have noticed that I'm on my phone less. And I want to start doing more things, like leaving my phone at home when otherwise I'd have it in my pocket. I want to go to restaurants and not feel like I'm constantly going to be pulled away from whatever on my phone. I want to be present with the people that I am with and spend time with them in meaningful ways. I am not perfect at this, and it's going to be a struggle for all of us to try and maintain brain sanity in a world of phone insanity. I continue to love my phone for the places that it can take me, both literally and figuratively. But I also don't want to lose sight of where I came from and where it is that I want to go.